start with our discussion questions tonight. We're going to start with question one. What are some of the things you do when preparing for a trip or a journey? Um, for years, Martha's been our list maker. When we get ready to go on a trip, Martha would always make a list, and she would have an extensive list. And then she would make her list out, and then she would lay it out on the bed and order it as the way it should be packed and everything. And she does, and when we went to Alaska last summer, I, it was a pretty extensive list because our bags and you really want to pack. She had a good list, and we took everything we needed, but she always makes the list. Now, for me, I'm not as much of a list maker. Mine's more about, okay, we're going to take the car. Kind of like what Cameron's dad was talking about this morning. We're going to take the car, so I need to make sure we get the oil changed. I want to make sure the tires are okay. I want to make sure if I'm taking a topper on top, I'm going to get it on, and I want to know what time I'm going to put it on. So that's the type of things I do. As far as the list and preparation, I can pack my stuff in probably 10 minutes and getting it all in there because wrinkles don't bother me when I'm vacating, so I'm not too worried about it being rolled up or anything like that. And Martha, if they can hear you, what do I say to you when we get somewhere? If it's not on the list and we get there, what can we do? We can go buy it when we get there. So, so that's the way that when I'm preparing for a journey, and Martha's my list maker, and she does a good list, so I can kind of live off of that too. But that's how I prepare for a journey. What about some other people? What do y'all do?
Well, we're getting ready to go on vacation in a little over a week, so we're kind of in that. So to tell you the difference between all of us, so we're leaving a week from tomorrow. Grace, right after church this morning, said, I'm starting packing today. So, and then me, I will pack probably Sunday night since we're leaving really early Monday. But no, some of the things that we do, of course, I'm a list maker. I mean, that's just the nerdiness of me, I guess. But I don't know, save money, make reservations, and arrange for pets. That's always one of the things that's in my mind because, you got a family member here at the house that doesn't get to go with us, so we got to make arrangements for Miss Sally and the cats. So,
what about anybody else?
I guess me and Regina, most of the time, we start preparing maybe a couple of days ahead, and I guess I'm the one that always writes everything down and checks it off. And I'm like Kyle. We got members here at the house, like the horse, the dog, and the cats. If we're gone for a week or so, then I got to be taken care of. So I usually start planning for them about probably 2 weeks in advance or more. So everything is got to be taken care of. Then I guess I go back and check my list twice just to double make sure sometimes. And Jen does too.
I'm a big weather checker. Like if I'm gonna go somewhere, like every day or maybe twice a day leading up to wherever it is we're going, I'll check to see exactly how many days it's gonna be raining or sunny wherever it is we're going. And that affects packing slightly, but just more about me getting excited. That's something for me that I like to see is how many sunny days we're gonna have. Because we're typically, when we vacation, we typically go to the beach or somewhere that, sunny is good.
Okay. So I want to know like a general idea of how to get where we're going, particularly obviously if we're driving as opposed to flying. Like I don't 100% trust a GPS. So I want to already have a general idea so I know if we're going wrong.
I never get lost. Okay. So there we have some different ways. Randy, you got something to add to that on what you do?
No, I'm thinking about part 8.
Okay. We'll jump into part A right now. How has the past month or this morning helped spiritually preparing us to focus on evangelism? Well, I think we've grown as a congregation because sometimes we become well, we're going to listen to what Cameron says. We're going to listen to what the teacher says. And that's pretty well the gist of it. But I found ourselves too, as we're here, listening, and, sometimes, luckily we can mute ourselves, maybe somebody's got a question that we can answer at that particular time. And so I think that's one of the ways that what the past month has helped us in preparing and focusing on how we've done that. Now, Cameron's done an excellent job in teaching that and listening to what he has to say. But also, I also think too, just by being, it's helped us not take God for granted as much. And so it's probably made us stronger by listening and preparing for evangelism too in that way. Somebody else have some comments? Randy, do you have something you want to say?
I'm putting my thoughts together. The past 10 weeks, at the beginning of it, I had a conversation with one of our members, and this COVID and how we were having to shut things down and isolate. I was speaking of it in terms of, God is involved in this, divine providence. What can be learned from this? How can we grow from it? And it opened my eyes to this idea of evangelism, showing and teaching someone God. And I agree 100%, Cameron. We do that in how we live. And the people that see us have got to know we live it. And there's where I was talking with this guy. And he was older than I, been in church most of his life, but he just did not believe God was involved in our daily lives to the extent that I did. And so this COVID and what has happened in the last few weeks has been an excellent opportunity to talk with people about, God is involved in this. We've learned we can still worship and not do the traditional events, but we can still worship. We can still talk with God. I'm like those guys, Cameron, that their Jesus places in the cab of the tractor. Mine's in the cab of the truck. If you look for ways, there's been plenty of opportunities to teach through all this. Is the way I see it.
Anybody else got some comments?
I think just looking at the evangelism, well, this may not be more so evangelism as well, I'll say. I think it's one of the things that I guess I've kind of focused on the last couple of days especially is that we don't have to be inside the walls of a church to talk about God or to experience God. And I think whenever it comes to evangelism, it's really important that we point to God rather than to a church building. Because so many times we focus on pointing people to a church, and maybe sometimes we put a little too much emphasis on the church itself. And the point is to point to God and not to a church. And I think maybe the past few weeks, since we haven't been in a church, God's still there. We haven't been in a building. Sorry, the church is the people. We haven't been in a building, but God's still there all the time. So.
I agree with us. I think we've had a lot of opportunities to grow in a lot of different ways, and probably in some ways we've not been challenged with in the past. In this, and we have that opportunity now to expand that to others and to evangelize with others of what we know. This what we're doing tonight. Setting up home studies or anything like that, and group studies as we go on, and we get back as a group. But, if we want to have a Bible study on Zoom now, maybe it's not as convenient as it used to be. We're cooking suppers and things like that. But now, hey, we're getting in at 7 or 5 o'clock, and we're going to have a Zoom meeting. But we want a group, and we've got our group already set up that we're teaching with, and those groups can be set up at different ways and different maturity levels too, so that everybody can learn from that group. I think we've learned a lot about evangelism and different ways to evangelize and help especially growing within our families too, and challenge ourselves a little bit more. I think, and Randy, your point was actually my next and part of my next thing too. You know, where you said that, you know, maybe this happened and God expected us to grow in different ways and to teach others in different ways from where we are. And, you know, he blessed us with this ability to have, you know, a couple of years ago, we started with the videos and the things like that. And we started with the radios. And so we were really ahead of the game a lot farther than other congregations were in getting this set up and moving forward with this. So, you know, while we still were there, we were still able to meet together with different types of technology. And I think, you know, God sends us blessings sometimes, and sometimes we just need to make sure we're out there and taking advantage of those blessings. Anybody have another comment? We're going to move on to Jesus Place now. Do you have a Jesus Place? This could be anywhere that you associate with your and God's relationship being strong. Give me some Jesus Places out there.
Rachel said it sounds like a bed and breakfast. Jesus Place.
Is that where I'm at? Sound like a bed and breakfast?
No, well, I'm not saying that's like a Jesus Place. I'm just saying that term Jesus Place sounds like
it'd be the title of a
title of a coffee shop or a bed and breakfast or something. It was totally off track.
Hey, so new business opportunity there. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, you know, I know we all have that calming Jesus place that we like. You know, Randy was talking about his, the cab or the truck. You know, I like to go hunting, and in there, you know, just part of the hunting is just sitting there and admiring what God's nature and the beauty and things like that, and also just like sitting on this back porch, hearing the birds chirping and the wind chimes and the different things, and admiring the blessings and quiet serenity. You know, me and Martha went to Alaska last year, and part of the amazement was just seeing and appreciating God's beauty, you know, and getting away from the telephone and everything else. I mean, it was just such a happy place, and realizing that God created this for us. He created this for us to see. If you can't be spiritually moved and recharged and feel good about nature and God, and seeing something like that, you've got to slow down. You got to slow down and take a look at everything and really go back to Genesis and think about creation, where God was and how mighty he is, and how he can take over in your lives. And when we think about a Jesus place, that's what I think about. But it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere. Tell me some places.
Mine, am I muted? Okay, mine is more so like a time of the day. Like in the morning is my favorite time of the day. And whenever I lived back in Kentucky, we had a big front porch swing and it looked out over a field. And that was like, I love that in the morning. That's like my overall, but mine is just like being able to sit or go walk in the morning. And that's like just the time, because it's nothing's really like awake. I don't know, but I guess like there's not a bunch of cars around. There's not a lot of people around. At the morning time.
Mine's definitely in the woods. Cameron nailed it this morning when he's talking. In a tree stand is probably my absolute favorite place. Just being in the woods, whether it's hiking or duck hunting in a duck blind or what, just that is my place. And I'll tell you another one. I got to think about this, and talking about where you connect, I guess you could say, but one of the places I think where I'm spiritually uplifted more than others, I guess, is CYC. For whenever I leave CYC, I'm more uplifted than I am at probably at any other time of the year, and it's just like that every single year. So, but those are two of the things I thought of.
Hey, Kyle.
Yes.
Kyle, I got a question. Did you go expecting to be uplifted at CYC, or did it just happen?
I went as a chaperone. The first time.
I have too. And I did not want to go. I was dreading it. I was wore out. But one of the best spiritual revivals I ever had was at a youth rally at Paducah, Kentucky. What was that used to be? We went up there with Tim Woodard. Celebration. Was it Celebration?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, about 1,200 kids in a building on Saturday night, about 9 o'clock, and we were singing, and it was very moving, spiritually uplifting.
Yeah, and it seems like it was CYC. I mean, you know, you can hear good messages and stuff, but whenever it's hard to kind of put in the words the singing, and whenever you hear, you know, 8,000, 9,000 kids, you know, singing the same thing, it's just I don't know, it's just it moves you. So.
It does. It does.
I'll agree with you. CYC is so uplifting, probably as much for us adults as it is for them.
Yep.
Just to go there, and you know, I think there ought to be a challenge old people conference thing somewhere. I don't know, for us. So, but I think it renews our faith also to see these young people up there singing. And taking part, and see how they are so excited about God. You know, that is when we get us as some of the older people, we get to seeing younger people excited. It gets us, hey, there's hope. There's hope for people, and that's important for us to realize that hope is out there, and it renews us and maybe makes us more excited to get out there and teach others and do other things for us. And I think that's a big thing about a lot of what we're seeing here. Anybody else got some Jesus places?
I guess mine is when I'm out. I call it my road work, my walking and running, and just looking at maybe the beautiful sunshine, even on a cloudy day. I mean, I give God the thanks for being out to fresh air, the birds singing, and 3 miles is nothing when I go to God and talk to God out walking.
When our minds are focused on God, it makes a lot of things easier. Anybody else got a comment? I like awkward silence, so I don't mind giving you a second to think about it. It makes us all grow. Well, let's go down to number 8. How can we make our homes that very place, that very Jesus place, a spiritual recharge? You know, I'm going to go back, and this is kind of like what Randy said. I think we just went through something being at home. We've probably grew more being at home over the last couple of months than we have in quite some time, or I know I have, just by, you know, hearing a message. Even though you might be hearing somebody as a group or as an individual, but you're together as a family, and that's a big thing to make your home, bring God into your home, into your family. And I think that was just it was a charge for me, and I really enjoyed that part of it, and look forward to summer series and those things that we've got coming up to charge our batteries, and hear speakers come out with different opinions and things like that. I think it's a great way to recharge your batteries. What do y'all think?
For me, my Jesus place was, I was one of those church camp kids that I was talking about, and so like WKYC, that was my place every summer. I can't tell you how many hours have been spent there, and so when I'm looking at 2A and thinking through it, it's ironic. I wrote the questions, but I didn't actually fully think through them until right now. That I almost like trying to take it and in a way recreate it, because what makes that my Jesus place is that I'm surrounded by other Christians. It's that the times we spend in devotion, maybe some of the different speakers or whoever it is, and so I guess in an attempt to try to make our home, make this home that very place, incorporating and bringing in those relationships, those Christ-centered relationships. And I know even though it's been a little bit harder in coronavirus, but making sure that, you know, we're surrounding ourselves with those kind of people, making sure that that same, I guess, emotions and things, almost like mini church camp with just me at my own house. I know that might sound weird, but kind of doing my best to, if I'm, yeah.
Are you wanting?
I've also, this is like a little side note too, but also like being at home the past few weeks, like, it's really just held us accountable, and like it's shown us, it's just shown us to have that want more so, not because it's Sunday, it's time to go to church, but because it's Sunday, it's the Lord's Day, and then it's Monday, we need to study our Bible, and then, you know, like it's given us more time to really reflect on where our priorities need to be in terms of the time is always there. You got to do it. Does that make sense at all? What I just said?
Sarah,
Yes.
would you say you enjoyed worshiping at home because it wasn't so structured and time oriented?
Oh, I don't know. I've missed people. I've missed being there. It's been funny because he's at the church and I'm here all alone. But it's been good. I guess because, you know, you can I don't know. Maybe so. I don't know. But I'm ready. I'm glad we're back in church now.
Well, I've enjoyed it not being so structured, not having a start time. You got to make this class last so many minutes. Now you got to wrap it up. You've got so many minutes to get over to the other building. Is everything ready to go when you get over there? Mm-hmm. You know, what's coming next? And it turns into a job instead of a time to spiritual. Cameron, I know. You got to have somewhere where you connect with God, because your mind is so focused on making it happen for everybody else that many times you don't get anything out of it. Yeah. And that's what I found. And you walk away empty. And then you have to have these Jesus places to recharge personally, or you just you dry up. You know, you give and you give, and you're not getting anything back. You know, you got to have somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I've really enjoyed it, because I could just, if I want to sit and think about whatever for 2 hours, you can. If it's to 1 p.m. and it starts at 8 a.m., it don't matter. Yeah, I've enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. I agree. The breaking up this schedule, it lets you a lot, however much time you need for.
Like, you know, one thing, Cameron, you mentioned about, you know, your Jesus place, and this was definitely mine too, was camp whenever I was growing up. And, you know, in thinking about like what Randy was talking about, one of the things that makes that so special is because that's really all you focused on. The whole time you were there is about, you know, lifting yourself spiritually. And this is kind of, and, you know, and I think one of the things about church camp that makes it so special is, you really think about it, it's kind of the way the first century church met. Just kind of, you know, not, you know, nothing, you know, with any kind of a structure. Well, I mean, of course there is a structure at camp, but you know what I mean? It's not as formal. It's not as like, you got to be here this way. Okay, maybe I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit, but it's more of an informal learning and uplifting. And this is kind of like, you know, these past few weeks, I mean, we can kind of go at our own pace, but it's really, it puts the ball in our court really a lot. And I think it's something it's super important.
It's making everyone lead rather than follow.
Yeah, really good point.
Mm-hmm. Making everyone lead instead of follow. Okay, let's move on to B. In your opinion, how is a place of spiritual recharge beneficial? And I'm hoping I'm not going to jump in on anybody else's answer, but I think a lot of us will see this is you know, the world beats us down. The world beats us down, and it's hard to keep up and to stay on top and to, you know, to let God be your focus. We've got to get away from it. We got to get away from the TV. We've got to get away from the radio. We've got to get away from people. Got to get away from the phone sometimes, and we just need that time on our own. You know, I think about Jesus going out into the and fasting for 40 days. You know, what was he doing? He was recharging, and he knew he had a long, hard road that was coming up to him. But that's what he was doing. He's recharging. He was getting ready for his hard road. And I think that's what we need. We need to make sure we make that time for spiritual meditation and prayer, where we can get out on our own and really get back into it. Maybe it is going to CYC. We look forward to that every year, or whatever, but we need to make sure we take time for ourselves to do that. What do y'all think?
I keep coming back to, and even when Cameron was talking about it this morning, it's that Jesus place. And so I start thinking and going through my mind, well, what's my place? What's my place? And when Sarah said what she did about it's not really a place, it's a time, that made more sense to me, because I don't necessarily have that place because I have that time. And I know people tease me a lot because I go to bed at 8:30 every night. I like to go to bed early, but my Jesus time is at 5 o'clock in the morning, before the sun has come up, and with a cup of coffee and a Bible or something, before the world starts, before the kids wake up, before he gets up, before I have to face anything at all. And I feel like the time makes more sense to me than the actual place, because I can do that at that time of day, whether we're at the beach or we're at our house or we're somewhere else. I can always do it and count on that particular time of day to where that's my recharge, and it's beneficial. That time is beneficial to me because it sets the tone for my day. If I don't get up, what sleeping in for me, when I say oh my gosh, I slept in today, that's like 7 a.m. Like, I don't sleep late. I love to be up before the sun comes up. So if I miss that, I'm already, like, my day's done. I'm gonna have I just might as well not even get out of bed that day, because I'm done. I can't even function. There's no Jesus time, so there's no Jesus today, and I just can't even do this. So, but anyway, it makes more sense to me to have that Jesus time, because it does set that tone. That's how it's beneficial to me, is because if I don't do it right then and my day gets going, because I don't sit well. I don't sit still. I'm not a quiet person. I have a hard time focusing, but I can focus more and get more done in the first hour of my day before the world wakes up than I can any other time of day. So it's beneficial to me, because if I miss it, it's my whole day is just shot. So that's how it's beneficial to me, is just that time to kind of set that pace and set that tone for me for the rest of my day. I can come back to that time that I had spent that morning.
Good comments. What about
It's a
anybody
good
else?
thing that Jesus time is not only after 9 p.m. because guess who would be left out of Jesus?
I love mornings.
Hey, I appreciate everybody's comments. You know, if you've been in my class, you know this is what I like. I like the interaction. I like to be the fiduciary more than I do just to sit and teach up there. So I love to hear about everybody's opinions and what we've got going on. And I liked Randy's comment a while ago too. You know, and this is, I guess, for me, maybe one of the drawbacks from radio and those things. You know, I like for Cameron to go on when he's on a roll or somebody's on a roll. You know, I don't like those time constraints to say, oh, got to shut it off at 11 o'clock, or we got to shut it off at 10:50, or we got to shut it off. You know, I like this in this class and the interaction. You know, that hey, okay, we might go over a little over an hour tonight. I don't even know what time it is, to be honest with you. So I'm not even looking at a watch. So I'm not gonna play that. But I do think, by not being in those time constraints, it makes us a little more relaxed with each other, and we learn more from that. Anybody else on the spiritual recharge beneficial part? Anybody got a comment?
I've seen how drained I am without it, I guess. It's not, we're living in a world right now that is so exhausted, just so categorize it all to get just exhausted. And it kind of clicked with me this afternoon. At the beginning of, not to make this story too long, but at the beginning of quarantine, I was checking in on some of the kids, and a girl in our group, I asked her how she was doing, how she's making it through quarantine. She said, really good. And she basically outlined and said that she's doing kind of a social media fast. And I thought, that's a really good idea. And so I started to kind of follow in suit. I deleted the little app off my phone, and my screen time told me that it was down 80% since I didn't have social media. I wasn't on my phone as much, but I do still get on there periodically for ministry things. And this afternoon was one of those times, and I started scrolling through my news feed, and as you can imagine, it's not coronavirus anymore. It is political statements and riots and everything else. And I'll be honest, because I wasn't connected into social media and the news very much, like I really didn't know how many people were very invested in that, very connected in that, and not at all. My heart will be broken if I am the reason that this discussion turns any direction political. So please don't. But what it did, churn up in my mind is, man, I've only been scrolling for 30 minutes. I've only been scrolling for 35 minutes, and it is just exhausting to see how exhausted and exhaustive all of these thoughts and comments and posts and hurt feelings are. And so the reason that all that goes to say, the reason that it's beneficial to me is because I've seen how exhausted I can be, and I've seen how exhausted others are kind of without it. I'll stop talking now.
I think that's a good point. If we let ourselves get exhausted by the world, it's just going to beat us down. It's the world. It's not, if we know what the world represents, world represents bad, not good. And so if we let it beat us down, that's what it's going to do. And it's going to beat us down. It's going to make us lose faith. It's in God and in man. And so we have to recharge. We have to find that place that we can go to, or that time we can go to, where we can just be with God, settle our minds, relax. And we have to make those times and those places that we go to for that. Let's move on to question 3, I guess. We're really burning up the questions tonight. What thoughts come to mind on us making the gospel a blessing over a burden? Cameron, your thoughts really struck my mind when you said this morning. We hear so many times people say, well, God has burdened me with this, or I've been burdened with this, or I've been burdened with that. When I think about that, and I've heard that statement before, and when I think about that, I said, okay, this man gave his son for you. He gave his son for you. How can anything that he would ask you to do or be a burden to you? How could anything in the world be a burden for you? He's blessed you so much. How, when we look at that, how can we think of something as a burden to us? That's almost like, well, I really don't have time for God. I really, that's over here. I don't really have time because I don't have time to go out and teach this person or tell him about God, or I don't have time to teach a class, or I don't have time to you fill in the blank for something God there. that should be a blessing, something that we're willing and able, to do, as in just a minute payback of something that he is given and is promised for us. I've always struggled with that, something to be God gave me a burden. I don't, that's always something I struggled with. What's y'all's thoughts on that?
I know what you're talking about, Barry. And I think a lot of, and I deal with the same thing, but a lot of it, whenever we view the gospel as a burden, is I think it really, the root of the problem is our selfishness and really our priorities, because it's not that it's too much to bear. It's just sometimes we don't want to make it our priority. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think a lot of, and I'm speaking for me. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I know whenever it becomes like a burden, sometimes for me, it's usually once I think about it, I'm like, I have time for this. I just don't want to make it. And that's usually my problems with it whenever looking at the burden side of it.
I've come to kind of realize through this whole series that evangelism, it's a change. It has to be a total change in mindset of, okay, this is going to be awkward. I know they may reject me, from the negative standpoint all the way to I have this that somebody else could have, and loving them enough to take it to them, and putting aside the fact that it might be awkward. And this is something too, there was a preacher one time, I don't even know who it was, but he said, how would you like to get to the gates and realize that there's so many more people that you could have spoken to about it if you weren't worried about it getting awkward? And I was like, how true is that? Because that's so many that you're just worried about socially, and so I think, like I said earlier, when it comes to evangelism, you have to totally reverse how your mindset has been, from it being this burden that I have to go and share to people, to something that you get to do because you have what we have.
Great point.
Sarah? Sarah,
Yes.
along your thought there of, it's something I've got to go do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've all grown up interpreting, or maybe it's been presented to us this way, and therefore we think this way, that to evangelize, to spread the gospel, is we've got to stop what we're doing and go do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And really, if we live it, then we're doing it.
Right.
And there's where, just like as Cameron was saying this morning, I'm one person at church, I'm one person at Sunday, and then I'm somebody else during the week. And I seen that as a teenager, the ridge that I grew up on. Men that said that were church going people, but they were different people during the week.
Right.
And as a teenager, small child, I could see that. Didn't understand it, but I could see it. And then you seen other people that lived it all week long. Well, they was evangelizing all the time and didn't even realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things I think we've got to understand. Just live it. And then we are doing God's work, and then we don't have to have these guilt trips about, I've got to give an hour today or 2 hours today to a specified person or event to say I've done evangelism today.
Right.
Any other comments?
I feel like today we probably, as far as the sheep being ready to gather, is out here in this world, that anyone you run into today, I've noticed me running into people, different places, and most people, you get to talking with them, then we start talking about God. And I've known some of these people for a long time, and as far as being out in the public, I've never really had a conversation with that person them maybe starting the comments, or I start the comments about the religion, and putting our thoughts more on God. And I feel like today really is a blessing in order to talk to people about God and try to explain to them this is something that God is with us. God's going to help us if we do our part and try, and anything we see that are ways to help people, we need to try to do so. And sometimes the smallest or the type of things we do for people, the more likely they're going to appreciate it. Maybe do that in return to someone else or others. So I feel like today it's more of a blessing, things that we can do as far as getting out here and teaching God.
Anybody else got any comments? Down to number 4. Let's reread Romans 11:17-24. Are there any thoughts either on the text or spurned by the text? I'm going to read this and y'all listen on that, okay? I'm going to be reading from the NIV. If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted among others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this: you do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will then say, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fail, but kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut off of an olive tree that is wild by nature, and contrary to nature were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? You know, some of the things that came out to me as I was reading this or whatever, I guess key words were roots. You know, a tree is really only as strong as its roots, if you look at it. And sometimes we see a tree that's been blown over or whatever, because a lot of times it just didn't have a great root system or a great steady there. So that was something, and that's a source. That's the source of where you're fed by. So, you know, when I look at that, I think about God, and I think about the things he does for us. But also some of the things that really stood out to me too is, you know, when it talked about branches being broken off, unbelief. You know, when we think about that, and we think about, you know, oh, I made it. You know, I've been baptized. I've made it. I've been grafted in. I'm good. Nothing else. That's not the end. That's just the start. You know, that's, you know, for the tree to develop, it still has to be nourished, and you're a part of that. And so I think that it's really important to know that just because you're a part of it doesn't mean you can always stay there and be a part of it. It's your choice. You have to make sure that you're filling your part and doing your part to stay there with that. And it's just a beginning, not an end, when you're grafted in. Those are when I read through this, is what I thought some of the points from. What some of the points y'all got from it?
I think one of the parts that stood out to me was verse 18. I just love the way that it's kind of smacks you in the face a little bit.
Yeah.
It says, if you are, remember, it's not you who support the root, but the root supports you. And that should just tell us that, look, no matter who you are, Jew, Gentile, or whoever we are today, no matter how good you think you are, or how good you've been, all the works that you've done, all this, you don't deserve grace. You don't deserve it. So none of us do. So focus on that fact alone. That one fact alone should make you. It should make me go to my neighbor's house right there and just say, hey, you know what I've got that I don't deserve, and you can get it too. Just focusing on that fact should be the motivator for evangelism. That should be the things that just pushes us. But the whole section's awesome, but that one is just kind of like, hey, it's like grabbing me by my ears and shaking me and say, hey, look, you don't deserve it, but you still got it.
A lot of arrogance going on in that first couple of verses there of what they're telling not to be arrogant or conceited about. What else? Let's move on to question A. How do Paul's life and background play into the meaning and fullness of this passage? Cameron, when I read this, I was a little, okay, how far back in Paul's life am I going here? Because when I think about this, but I think you really have to look at Paul's entire life when you think about Paul. Paul was the Jew of Jews. He was the one that he thought before he found Christ, he thought he was doing right. And so when I thought about that, I thought, well, to look at Paul, you have to really look at him as where he came from and where he's going. And Paul, I guess, he probably thought he was the strongest part of the tree at one time. He was probably that conceited person at one time when you look at him, until he and that he was doing the right thing and persecuting Christ. But as he found Christ and found out what it was, he became that. I guess I don't know the word I'm looking for, but he became that part that he became fullness. He started realizing the fullness that he could have in Christ. And Paul, he looked at then if you look at Paul and where we were coming from and some other, he had his spiritual place was just about anywhere he was at. By he could make being in jail his Jesus place. He could make being persecuted his Jesus place. He had that ability to make wherever he was that Jesus place for him. And I think just by looking at that Paul, he just he grafted right into that tree, and he grew, and he made everything stronger from the type of person he was. And he was just glad to be there. He wasn't one that, hey, I'm here and that's all I want to do. I've still got to do more. And he could never do enough. What's y'all's thoughts on that?
Barry, I think the turning point for Paul was from the time he lost his sight on the Damascus Road, that time period that he was blind before Ananias came to him and spoke to him. He realized that's when he came to, he had been torn loose from that tree. And he spent that time wondering, am I lost? Will God throw me away, or will God do something with me? And soon after that, and by the time Barnabas comes along, he realizes he's been grafted back. And that put that fire in him that he realized, I lost it momentarily and it was given back. And that put a fire under him that he never lost.
Yeah. He's if you want to look at somebody inspiring to put any kind of fire under anybody, Paul's that inspiration for you. The man was beaten, he was stoned, he was imprisoned, and he didn't look back and say, this is all for naught. He was that inspiration, and that's how comes through in his writings. He can be tough when he needed to be, but he also could be very loving and considerate when he needed to be, and you know, the right man for the right position, I guess, of what he needed to be at that right time.
Right time.
Another thing
Any more
about Paul
comments
is,
there?
yeah, another thing about Paul is, you know, even after his conversion, and you know, we see it in some of his letters. No matter what he, I don't want to say accomplished, but no matter what he did and the people he reached out to, he never took pride in it. Like he was never proud of himself. I'll put it that way. He was happy that it furthered the gospel, but it was never anything that he looked at it as, you know, he would just pat himself on the back for the things that he had done. It was always everything's done for God and not for himself.
Hey, Kyle,
Yes, sir.
do you think, now you said this man as Paul never put himself, or was it proud of what he did as a person? Do you think when he was Saul and persecuting, do you see him as a proud person of what he was doing at that point in his life?
Yeah, because of some of the Pharisaical mindsets, you know, it was all about status, but it was really more about works and the things that you had done and the way that you're perceived. And whenever you base your happiness on what others perceive, that's really all you focus on. And I think back then, I mean, I think he may have I could just see Paul back in his pre-conversion days with a little chalkboard of things that, you know, oh, there's a Christian that I persecute today. There's 2 checks, and you know, there's somebody maybe I'm being silly, but you know what I mean. I think he probably took his prior lifestyle was one that he took pride in the things that he had done, and then now he realized going forward, it's like, nope, it's not about me anymore.
Right.
Yeah, I think that same thing. You know, I think about Paul holding the coach when they were stoning Stephen, I think it was. You know, there's probably a little smirk on his face up there, and just more. I think that patting on his back might have been happening. That he may have been doing the patting on his back while he was there, and just watching and think, oh, look how good I am for what I'm having done here. You know, I think that was probably more of an attitude at that time instead of the latter attitude that we saw in Paul later in life.
It seemed to be something that was cultivated from a young age with him. There's a scene in the movie 42 about Jackie Robinson that I think of when I think of Paul being cultivated into a sinful mindset when he was younger. If you've seen the movie, you might remember. If not, you can go think of it whenever you watch it. But I think when I'm reading through this, it almost seems like there's, I'm not trying to put words in Paul's mouth or anything. It almost seems like a little bit of frustration with the Jews, just looking at the timeline of Paul's life and seeing different conversations that he had with the Jewish people, such as in Acts 15, or looking at the letter Galatians that he wrote dealing with Judaizers. It seems that as he's writing this, it's very bold, maybe a little bit frustrated at times, you know, when he's saying things like, God can cut you off. Like, you're not so star-spangled awesome that God won't prune your branch. But I guess just seeing that, I can imagine, from his perspective, I can imagine being looking in on some of these Jews' lives and having what Paul has and being as thankful as Paul is, and looking at them and saying, how do y'all not see it? How can y'all not be how can y'all not be more thankful enough to act a little bit differently? And then after, I think that gives a little bit of room for some self-reflection of maybe Paul looking at me and saying, you know, are you living as thankful? Am I, you know, saying to myself, like, am I living as thankfully as maybe I ought to?
Well, and that's something too that I don't know how I didn't never realize this until just a few years ago. But Paul really did believe he was doing the Lord's will by killing all of these Jews. And he thought, like you said, and that's where that pride came in, that he thought, well, the Lord is so proud of me for doing this. You know, he had in his mind, and I don't know how I'd never known that up until a few years ago. But I had just heard that he was a persecuting Christians, blah blah blah, but he was thinking that it was all for good.
Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
we've all dealt with that to an extent. When we realize that Paul did not make a 180-degree change in his thinking,
Mm-hmm.
he believed in Jehovah God.
Right.
He was devoted to Jehovah God. He wanted to please Jehovah God. He was ready to devote his life to Jehovah God as Saul. He just needed to accept the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Damascus Road experience did. This is the guy. And that's really the only change he had to make, was that he had to accept that Christ was the Messiah. And it wasn't a major change. It was just a course variation.
I think, I think probably Paul, as that variation, of course, we're talking about it, even going back to what Cameron said, when we think about Paul, he was that Jew of Jew. And so also then when he saw that and needed to make that correction from a Jew to make sure they were going to Christianity instead of putting themselves on that pedestal, he recognized that. And he whenever that correction needed to be made, he made it. When we go back to Peter and back into Jerusalem when they were slipping back into circumcision and different things there back into, but that was the Jew coming back out and presenting itself. But Paul was very quickly to make that correction. Peter accepted it and realized that but Paul knew, okay, that's not the path. That's not the way we're going. We're on Christ's path now, not the Jewish path. And so he was very quick to correct that path because he walked it. He knew it. Any other comments on Paul's life and background there? Let's go to number 5. What are some good things in life that people are often proud of? What are you proud of? I guess when I look at that, and proud is hard for me when I think about that and trying to think about good things and think about proud. But proud of my children, proud of our church, proud of my relationship with God, and I guess, and sometimes maybe this falls. I hope it falls more toward church, but I like being the go-to person. Hey, let's ask Barry. He's probably got an answer to that. So I like people that being there, and I need to, so that's some things that that people are often proud of, or what I'm proud of. But sometimes people are more proudly of the worldly things, and that's where we need to start thinking about too. So, and so, what are you proud of? What in life makes people proud?
Rachel's proud that her husband is awesome. That's what she just told me.
That's what I thought. I heard that.
That's not what I said.
She said,
Harry, you weren't putting words in her mouth.
She said, I don't want to say it, but that's what I think.
That's not what I said. We need to have a lesson on lying.
No, I'll talk about things that we're really proud of. I'm really proud of our kids. I am. I'll be that dad, I guess, but I'm super proud of the kids. And not for anything that I've done, just the way that they've turned out. They're just good kids.
I feel like that I'm proud of my kids, the way they turned out, and very proud of my grandkids. And I know the future will hold good things for them because I feel like they've got good parents, good teachers. And when God's involved, things turn out, I feel like, to the best possible way that it could turn out. And good things in life. I know there's a lot of people are proud maybe of their profession, the ranking they achieved in their professions, and different things. I used to have a little say when I coached basketball, and I remind my team of this almost daily. When you think you're good, that's when you need to go to the practice floor and practice that much harder. And you're not basically trying to be a show off, but you're proving by your actions what you can do. And I feel like life is like that. People who go to church on a regular basis, they should be a Christian Monday through Saturday night and get recharged on Sunday morning.
Well, let's go ahead and go to 8 because this kind of blends right in with what we're seeing there. With this in mind, what can you foresee happening in our lives when we are proud of the story God has grafted us into? What do you think about that? What can you foresee happening in our lives when we are proud of the story God has grafted us into?
I think the first thing that comes to mind on stuff like this is a proud grandparent, because they are always, like, hey, if I told you about my grandson, let me show you a picture. And then I think of us being proud of the story of God, so that it's so natural that whenever we run into somebody, we'll say, hey, let me tell you about God. Let me show you him.
Let me show you a picture.
Yeah, let me show you a picture. You know what I mean? So it's you're so proud of it, but the next step is to have a dialogue about it. And that's just kind of the same way that a grandparent or a parent, I'm not picking on grandparents, the same way that we're proud of kids and we want to talk about it is the same way we should be as evangelists. And that should be our next step is, look, I don't want to just, be proud of it and keep it to myself. I want to tell you about him and about how I don't deserve, his grace, and how, you can be in the same boat.
I'm giving awkward silence. Okay. Anybody else got a comment?
I found a way as a Christian to show those pictures you're talking about, the illustration you did as a grandparent. When we as Christians in the workplace, some kind of calamity happens to us, sickness, accidents, things that most people say, well, that was bad. That's going to cost money to overcome. That's going to take time. And we come out of it extremely easily. Now, we go through it, we suffer it, but we come out, as I was saying, smelling like a rose. And some people will never, ever use the term, I looked up. And because people are watching, if you say, I looked up, you're saying, I did that, or God is not involved. But when people comment like that to you, that's a chance to show God in your life and say, that was divine providence working in my life. Because they see that. That got their attention. So you need to clarify to them, that wasn't luck. That was God in my life. And they'll start watching you more closely. And you've opened the door to teach over a period of time things that you've got their attention. And once you get their attention and their curiosity, then you can talk to them. And to me, that's one of the things we got to do. When these calamities happen to us and they think we're really hurting and they feel for us, and then we come out of it so easily, give God the credit. You're showing a picture when you say that.
I think part of this is when we think about it as people that we're teaching and we've come into contact with, whether it's family, whether it's friends, or maybe even a stranger, and we become a part of the reason that they made this turnaround and profess God. It's part of us that we help, but it's not all us. but it's something that we can be proud of and something we can build our esteem off of. You know, I helped that guy. I helped him see God. I helped him become a Christian. And that builds your confidence. Don't stop there. Move on and grow that confidence, because if we can let God thrive in us, it's going to build our confidence up, and people are going to see God in us that we may not even realize that are watching us too. But God's going to work in us if we will let him work in us. We just have to open our minds, do what he says, and God will work in us, and God will help us bring more to Christ. And one of the things, as we evangelize and as we become more confident in what we do, we can step out and talk to people a little easier. Sometimes it's hard, but sometimes it's not as hard as we think it's going to be. We think have that burden placed upon us. It's not a burden. God's blessed us and given us the abilities, and sometimes we have to grow those abilities. It's just like the parable about the talents. We can bury them and not let them produce anything, or we can let them grow. And God's going to give those abilities for us to grow. We just have to use those talents that he's given us, and we'll grow, and we'll grow, and we'll grow. What other comments have we got there?
Looking at this and thinking about some of the things that have been mentioned when it comes to blessings, I know that it's something that we're probably kind of shy or leery of saying that we're proud of. I know that I am, is we think of like physical or like monetary blessings. And I think that, there can be a kind of, as Randy was saying, with the godly interaction in our lives, that there can be a healthy view of a lot of those things where we realize exactly how blessed that we are. And something, for me that kind of resonates reading 5A is the moment that I realize that it's a gift from God. And I easily give 50 different things in my life that physically or monetary, but the moment that I realize that that's a gift from God, then it no longer feels like mine to keep for myself anymore. More like mine to share if it wasn't, if it's not mine to begin with. And so I guess in the same way that can transfer over into the gospel of, this wasn't me, this wasn't mine, this wasn't my own work, this was God's, and he's just gifted it to me. So that, if that makes any sense, it's my place, not to keep it to myself, but share it.
I'll tell a quick story today. Me and Rick went to Larry Harper's funeral, and Cameron and Sarah were there, and some others were there today also at the funeral. At the start of the funeral, all the firemen came in dressed, and there was probably, 30 maybe or so bunch. They surrounded the whole area up there around the casket, and they had music playing with the bagpipe pipes while like kind of progressional in and stuff like that. And it was a very touching thing to see. And they saluted him while is what he was. And we all know Larry was not had a lot of physical abilities and what he could do and things like that, but he touched these men, and these men were touched by being there and what they did. And it was a really emotional thing to see them, for me, up there. And we have that same ability to touch somebody. Sometimes we don't realize that we're touching, but it was an emotional thing to see that, and to see those men showing their respect for Larry and how they had known him. And we have those same abilities to touch people out there within the world. Any other comments?
I think, talking about evangelism, I think that if we're really looking to pull people to Christ, I think maybe our actions are more effective than our words. And and especially if people see our actions and they don't line up with what we're trying to teach them and what we're trying to tell them, especially, then our words are useless if we don't live the lives to show it whenever we're not trying to talk to them about Christ. And I think I think our words fall on deaf ears if they don't see us live for Christ whenever we're not around. So I think the way we act and the way we treat people, not just people we're trying to evangelize, but to everybody, because the world looks at us, whether we want to admit or not. The world is looking at us with a magnifying glass, and if we can't walk the walk, then our words are going to be pointless.
Exactly right, Kyle. I agree with you. It's, it's hard to impress somebody on something when you've never done it yourself, or not doing it yourself. How can you, I mean, I guess you could probably be a baseball coach, never played baseball, but it'd be kind of hard. In the same way about being a Christian, how can you teach to be a Christian if you're not a Christian? And so I think that's what we have to look at. It's more than just getting wet and being a Christian. It's more of how you live your life. Are you in Scripture? Are you teaching? Are you leading by example? We're teaching whether it's good or bad. We're teaching either way we go in life, whether we're teaching good things or we're teaching bad things. We're teaching, and our kids are prime examples of that. They watch us. We're teaching them every day of what we're doing, whether it's good or bad. We're teaching people, and that's how we as Christians, if we're not walking the walk, people are going to see that. And so that how can they respect us for what we're doing if we're not walking the walk? Any other comments? Well, I want to thank everybody for being so interactive tonight. It makes class, I think, and we get a lot of opinions here and a lot of discussion. I think we all grow more from that, and I do appreciate that. And I guess we should have opened with a prayer, but I just now thought about it and we didn't. So, Kyle, would you lead us in prayer?
Sure. Let's pray. Our God, we love you. We thank you for blessing us with this beautiful day. We thank you for the time that we've had this morning in the church building again for the first time in a while. We thank you for that opportunity. Lord, we're so blessed to have Cameron preaching again this morning. We thank you for his powerful sermon that he brought. God, we thank you for the opportunity that we've had tonight to discuss it and to really discuss how we can be better evangelists. And God, we just thank you for all the ways that you open the door for us to communicate with each other and to be able to spread your word and to talk to other believers about you. God, please be with us as we continue this work week. Lord, especially tonight, we pray for all the police officers. They're faced with so much these past few days, so much that they don't deserve. God, just help them to know that we love them, that we appreciate them, but more importantly, just keep them safe and protect them. Lord, please be with all of us. Help us to be the people that you want us to be. It's in your Son's name that we pray. Amen.
Amen.